For today, we're going to be teaching you how to get started with Unity and mainly make a game throughout the series that is based on a game I worked on in the past. So let's get started. So first, you want to download Unity from the website. It will be linked in the description below. And then you want to download Visual Studio Code for your operating system. After that, you got everything set up. You will open Unity Hub. And after you open Unity Hub, I want you to, the UI will be great with this UI. You want to sign in. I believe if you sign, there's going to be sign in option. You sign off your account through. Alright, so to install Unity, you want to go to installs and install editor. You want to install the latest version and do for, I will suggest Mac build, Linux build, Windows build, and WebGL build, and Universal Platform build, and then that should be it. You should also install this by have it downloaded, and then you click on install. I'm not going to do it because I have no Google, GitHub, or anything. After that, you can do a new project. So I want to do a new project. Now, we're not going to use any of these assets or pre-made samples. We're just going to start from base scratch. We're just going to be making a tutorial game. And it'll be stored in your location, then you create a project. Now for this course, you might need some C# experience, but it won't be that much. The Unity instance, you can have multiple instances. Copying tutorial. So basically, you will need some C# experiences with variables and if statements and functions, and some yeah, that's about it. Just wait for this. After you open it, you will be greeted with this basic UI. Now let's wait for the C# scripts to compile. After this, you'll be greeted with all of this UI. So you want to move, you want to right click, or actually, yeah, right click on the scene inside here where your cursor is here. You want a WSD to move. You could scroll to make it faster or slower, and you could also use the middle wheel mouse button to pan. This is to select. So we got our main camera, so it's going to be rendered through. So if you click on this game tab right here, you will see that the main camera is what is going to be displayed through the game. So what we're going to make is use a simple cube as our ground. So we're going to name this ground. And after this, we're going to make a new tag. And this will be, and I'll explain this later on. And now if so, we got to scale this up because it's going to be our ground. So we could use this to 0, 0, 0. Reset our location, and then through the game we can see the cube. And then we want to make it 10 by 1 by 10. And this game would be a simple game based on you running around and try to dodge the enemies. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to first run our game to see how it looks through the game main camera. And it looks pretty good. As you can see, we got this, but I want the camera to be angled somewhat like this. So what we can do is we can use these 3 arrows to move on its axis. So I want it to be through the rotation, or you could click here. You could rotate like this with the arrows once again. And then I want to move it back a little. And then for our skybox, which if you see the background, it looks really bland and ugly. I want to change it to a solid color. of black, the endless void, now looks more minimalistic and cleaner, if you understand. And then we agree with this. I also want to rotate this on the y-axis by 10, just to make it look more facing to you. And now I want a player. So first, I want to create a new player prefab. You could create player prefab by right-clicking on the assets area, and then on hover over create, you'll find prefab, and you want to name this player. And through player, I want to make another bean right here. Actually, we're gonna make our player a capsule, or a cube, and we want to give it a material. So we right-click on the assets again and create a material right here. Now, material is basically a shader or a color for any object or game object. So we're gonna name this player color. And then after this, through here, where you see this over here, this is color. You could dye it red. What I want to do is I want to dye it yellowish gold. And then drag this here, and then we could drag this cube player down to here. We want to drag here, and then basically if we drag it right here, we have our player. So now we could delete this. We could get working on drag this back here, and we could get working on the player script. So to create a player script, you have to right click on the add component and this create a new, like, just name it player movement, and then it says new script, and then click on it and you have the player movement, which if you don't have it, then you could retype it player movement, and then you can create an add. And then after this, you want to write after this, you want to double click on the player movement here or here, and then you will be greeted with your default code editor UI. Now it might look different for you. It is because I have customized. Alright, so after you finish creating C# script and load up VS Code, if you don't, then you could go back to here, and you could go here, and you could go, and you could show in folder, and then right click on here, and then there's something like open with, and choose VS Code here. Alright, so back to here, we would do the code. So basically we have void start and update already basic. So basically start is already called before it updates, and this is basically calls before this, or basically this starts before that. So we could, in our update, we could theoretically say, because this is called every time, no matter what, it's called every second basically. So we could just say debug.log, which basically is basically like you're printing to this console. And you see this? Yeah, because we did not finish our line of code, because every C# thing needs a semicolon. So we could type here, it's like hello world. And then through here, if we run the game, theoretically this should be calling already. So basically, as you can see, it is called over 400 times, 445, 446, okay. So this is working. Now what we can do is, we could get the player objects. So player objects are basically, or game objects are basically what is, like, you see it's player, yeah, it's a game object. And it's basically object that basically you have control of. So basically you could use transform to move the player, but if you want to access all of this code, you could just do public game object player, and then through here you could do player.transform, which we get this, or player.mesh or send message, and add a component, get component game object just to get that, or player.gameObject.tag just to get the tag we used right here, back then right here. And we could tag this with theoretically player. And this ground, we could tag this with ground. And we could theoretically edit everything. And if you want physics, you could do rigid body. And this is basically a physics unit physics system, which basically gives you the gravity and what to move. Now you could freeze a rotation or you could freeze a position, but we do not want all of these to be unchecked because we are going to explain this and use this later. So if you're familiar with physics, you already know mass, rotation, and velocity, and speed, but we are first going to stick to transforms. So instead, we want the public void. We're going to get you. So to get the user input, we could do something like this. Since we already have the game object here declared, then we could do if input dot get key code dot a or w, and then we're going to do trans player, because it's a game object. We could get everything, so we're going to get the transform dot position, which if you don't know what position is basically right here. And if you do, basically if you move the x, it moves along the x-axis. Dot position plus equal vector 3 forward. Not else if, because we do not want it to be clicked at the same time. Pressure, we could use ifs. We want to copy this down 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then S, A, B. And then we could change this to back. Change this to, because A is on the left, so we could change this to left. And D is for right. And as of, because this is, if this is dependent on your frame rate, if your frame rate is high, it moves faster. If your frame rate is low, it moves slower. And I do not want a better gaming PC to have a better, higher active advantage. So we're going to do times time dot delta time, which basically it moves syncs with the time. So we could copy this down. 1, 2, 3, and then we could test it out in the game. So first we gotta drag this down, the game object, which this down to here, and then if we save, and it should theoretically work. So as you can see, it's working perfectly fine, but we have no desired speed, and we gotta set our speed to at least, so we're gonna declare public speed. Public float speed equals to, let's say 10f. And we want to times it with speed. So we could copy this again, and then declare here, and here. And theoretically, this time it should move super fast. Or as I expect. Alright, so it's moving perfectly in sync with the time. It is perfectly, and then I want to up the scale for this, so we're going to turn this to 25, 20, and 20. And now we could zoom out on our camera too much, but this time I want the camera to be more of down here. And so now we basically randomly generate coins here, and around and generates inside this spawn radius, and we just keep track of the score. That'll be so we are basically done with today's episode. So what we learned today is how to initialize player object and a player's float speed, and get in player input. And we also learned how to create prefab, and we also learned how